Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with an important update for the Elder Scrolls Online. In today's video, we'll be checking out the update 35 preview for combat changes. This was just recently posted on the ESO website, and it's a preview article of some pretty big changes coming in the next patch. Now, when is that next patch? Well, that's going to be the Q3 Dungeon DLC. That is set to release towards the end of August on PC, Mac, early September for console. So as usual, that will have some new dungeons, a new dungeon DLC that's available. And to go along with that, update 35, which is the base game patch that's available to all players. It's going to be free. And we have now an overview of what we can expect, at least from the combat side. Now, something else to note is that on Monday, this coming Monday, the PTS is going to drop for that patch. Sounds like it's going to be pretty big. A lot of changes. So stay tuned for that. I will be covering that in detail here on the channel as soon as we learn more. But this particular article is about combat changes and what we can expect. And it's big. It's big news. So we'll go ahead and read these over. These are from Gilliam. And let's jump right into things. So this update brings a massive slew of balance adjustments all at once to hopefully reduce the need of large sweeping changes in subsequent updates. And here we see the main focus of update 35. Twofold, they want to improve accessibility to the game's combat by increasing the duration of outgoing ability effects. So those are things like damage over time, buffs, and debuffs. And a continuation to attempt to quell some of the obscene damage production at the high end. And then we have a whole section on weaving. And I'm sure most of you who are watching this video understand what weaving is. It's basically adding light and heavy attacks into your rotation in between abilities to do things like increase your damage. Weaving in those basic attacks, that's just fundamental to ESO in so many ways, but for years it's also been substantial as far as how much damage those light attacks especially do. So they put some numbers here for reference. Many of ESO's high-end experiences and activities, the average build sees roughly 15 to 20% of their overall damage output coming from light attacks only. Seems like the developers are not liking that now, even though they did buff it. I mean, several years ago, there was a buff to light attacks to make this happen. Now, apparently, it's too much. So they've been testing an adjustment. So coming in update 35, we're reducing light and heavy attacks impact in damage production, adjusting their damage to deal a flat amount regardless of stats. So this is really interesting. They're not just reducing the damage. Light and heavy attacks are going to deal flat damage now, regardless of any boosts. Now, I'll have to talk about this, but this is a substantial change because you have things like Weapons Expert, which is a CP star, which boosts light and heavy attack damage. You have sets that boost light and heavy attack damage. So what are they going to do with all of these other things that center around light and heavy attacks? That's going to be interesting to see. And they say they've spent considerable time investigating the baseline experience that a new player would have with these attacks. So the aim is to not harm the low-end experience and target only the high-end. In doing so, we hope to reduce the difference of damage potential in a way that retains the satisfaction of learning to weave where the impact is still felt, but to much less a degree than before. So like we said, light attack weaving, especially at the high end, up to 20% of your damage. Using these adjustments they've been testing, they've now seen a reduction to about 6 to 11%. So cutting that light attack damage in half, essentially, is one of their main goals for update 35. And this is what they say. They want to allow for a much smaller and healthier gap while still retaining the sense of mastery and expression with weaving. Okay, and then they do mention here we'll be making significant changes to item sets, passives, and buffs to ensure classes remain balanced in damage production. Okay, I didn't even think about buffs. You do have buffs to light and heavy attacks as well, like the Empower buff that we see from certain classes and on werewolves. So this is definitely going to be interesting. My concern, and they kind of talk about it here, is heavy attack builds are fantastic, especially for new players. I really do want those to still be viable. They're just barely viable now with the right amount of buffs and the right sets. You can still do a really nice solo heavy attack build. I hope that they are going to keep that in play, but we'll just have to see all the details of this once the patch notes go live on Monday. So let me know what you think about that one. It's certainly a big change. And then the second part of that is going to be here in combat effects, specifically buffs, debuffs, and damage over time and healing over time abilities. So they talk about currently many of those abilities fall within a 10-second window. And I would agree, for the majority of players, a 10-second buff, a 10-second dot, things like that are difficult to manage. They actually have been going in this direction for a while. This is not new. We've seen things like Nightblade's Grim Focus, for example, have an increased duration. Wardens recently got an increased duration to one of their main heals, with almost a 1-minute duration for both of those buffs. So perhaps that was just some early testing on this effect, but I think it'll be nice, especially for buffs, to get longer durations. Their goal is stated down here. By extending durations, we hope to reduce the stress of many combat rotations, allowing you to focus more on the action in front of you rather than the action of juggling buffs and debuffs on your ability bar and making the game more accessible. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's definitely true for buffs and debuffs. The dot effects, I'm not too sure about because they do have to balance that, right? They're talking about it here in the next section, and this applies to healing as well. Heal over time effects. If your dot or your heal previously lasted 10 seconds and now it's lasting 20 seconds, you have to cut the damage or you have to cut the power of the healing. You can't leave it the same. So they talk about that here. Since many of these effects currently add a tremendous amount of power per cast, simply increasing their duration would merely inject significant power into the game. To combat this, we're adjusting many of these values to account for their increased duration. So there will be overall increase of effectiveness per cast while reducing their effectiveness per second. So this just means they're reducing the damage of these abilities per second while increasing their total output overall. So you'll have less powerful ticks of damage and healing every second, but since they're lasting longer, you're getting a greater total output value for those skills, basically, is what they're saying. Now, my question about this really has to do with PvP. In PvP, dots are already pretty weak because you have Battle Spirit. Battle Spirit cuts in half their damage, and so they're pretty easy to heal through. How is this going to affect PvP and dot builds specifically, where you want to really condense your damage in as short of a window as possible? Currently, you can kind of still make that work with like a couple of 10-second dots. You're stacking those up, maybe a 10-second proc. It's a good way to put pressure on an enemy, but if you double that duration, but cut the damage per second, is that still going to be the same amount of pressure? I don't know. That might be a side effect of this, is dots being barely used at all in PvP. That would be my main concern, but we'll just have to see how this looks when it comes out on the PTS next week. As I said, I will be checking out the patch notes as soon as they drop here on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed for that. If you enjoyed the video, as always, make sure to crush that like button to help share this video with others. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and let me know what you think of these changes down in the comments section below. Hey everybody, if you're struggling at all with the Elder Scrolls Online, I definitely know the feeling. I struggled with this game for months. The biggest problem I had was, even though the game says you can play any way you want, it never really teaches you how. Like I said, it took me many months of teaching myself how the game works before I could actually start to make builds that were truly effective and fun to play. Well, today I'm excited to let you know that I finally put down my system for creating builds into a simple step-by-step guide that you can now learn and use to create your own fun and powerful builds yourself. We're calling this the ESO Zero to Hero Academy, and it's being hosted through Podia, which is an amazing online learning platform. So far, our ultimate build guide has over 25 lessons and over 2 hours of content designed to take you from a beginner to a master theory crafter, not in years like it took me, but in just a few hours. So if you want to check out the guide and take advantage of our launch week discount, click on the link in the description or the pinned comment below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.